Well, on day 65 of Donald Trump's illegal war, Donald Trump threatened another war crime, this time telling a Fox reporter in a telephone interview that Iran will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth if Iran attacks United States Navy ships in the region. Donald Trump's war became fully illegal last week, and Donald Trump seems to know that.
What they call a military operation. You know, they don't like the word war, and they call it a military operation because that way you don't have a war, you don't have legal problems.
Legal problems. That was day 62 of Donald Trump's war, and he had a legal problem. By the time Donald Trump said that, even Donald Trump seemed to know that the War Powers Act, passed in 1973, made Donald Trump's war illegal last week. The War Powers Act says that the president can launch military operations for a maximum of 60 days, quote, unless the Congress has declared war or has enacted a specific authorization for such use of United States armed forces. And today, on the 65th day of Donald Trump's illegal war, he chose this childish language to continue his violation of the War Powers Act.
Our country's booming now, despite the fact that we're in I call it a mini war.
A mini war. On Friday, Donald Trump described his defiance of the War Powers Act without ever specifically mentioning the War Powers Act.
But you ever hear a situation where we're knocking the hell out of somebody and we have a Congress, please, you've only got 3 days left. We spent 19 years in Vietnam. We spent 12 years in Iraq. We spent 7 years in another place, 2 years in another one, 7 years in another one. We had another one for 14 years, and we're in there for 6 weeks. What's taking so long?
Congress learned its lesson with Vietnam, the war that Donald Trump refused to participate in when offered a chance by his local draft board, whereupon he presented a letter from a doctor saying that Donald Trump's feet just couldn't take a day in Army boots anywhere in the world. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed the House of Representatives and the Senate in 1964. The vote was unanimous in the House, and only 2 senators voted no. Both bodies voted on the same day. They literally did not know what they were voting for. They thought they did. They thought they knew why they were voting and what they were voting for. They voted for the president to use military force against what the resolution called, quote, the communist regime in Vietnam, end quote, because President Lyndon Johnson told Congress that North Vietnamese forces, as the resolution put it, quote, deliberately and repeatedly attacked United States naval vessels lawfully present in international waters. History would prove that was a wild exaggeration of a very minor incident in the Gulf of Tonkin. But the Congress immediately passed that resolution saying, quote, the Congress approves and supports the determination of the president as commander-in-chief to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. It was a one-page resolution. And the final sentence said, quote, this resolution shall expire when the president shall determine that the peace and security of the area is reasonably assured.
You can't get to record high disapproval with just members of the other party not liking you. So how do you get there? With us now, CNN chief data analyst Harry Etten. So we're not talking about Democrats here. Who are the people dragging down the president's approval ratings?
Who are the people who are dragging down President Trump's approval rating? We are talking about a very important block for the President of the United States. That is Republican-leaning independents. That is what's going on. Take a look here. This is the difference. Trump's approval rating at this point in terms. Independents who lean Republican versus those who are just Republicans only. Look at this among independents who lean Republican. Back in term number one, he was at 73% at this point in term. Down he goes, an absolute collapse now, just 53% of independents who lean Republican now approve of the President of the United States. That's very different from Republicans only. It was 83 at this point in term number one. It's 83% now, but that's a 20-point decline in his approval rating, nearly at the 50% mark, with a group that traditionally has very much been in the president's camp.
This isn't just indies. This is independents who lean Republican, people who in theory should be predisposed to like the president there. Talk more about the shift we've seen actually now this time from just a couple years ago.
Just a couple years ago. Take a look at this shift. Oh my. GOP leaning independents on Trump. In the 2024 election versus Kamala Harris, he got 91% of that vote, nearly 100, near uniformity on that one. But down he goes, down into the deep blue sea, now at 53% on the job approval rating. John, I'm not that good at math, but I believe that is a 38-point drop. A 38-point drop from where he was in the 2024 election. As I said, this is a core group for Donald Trump, and they are waving, adios amigos, goodbye. We no longer support you, President of the United States. We are going in the other direction. We're deciding to disapprove, then approve. He's just above 50% in a group that overwhelmingly supported him back in the 2024 election.
That's 18 months ago. I mean, this is a very brief period to drop that much among a group that is part of, frankly, your essential coalition there. So what does this tell us? What does this group think of maybe the congressional elections coming up in 6 months?
Yeah, okay. So you see this 38-point drop here, and you're a Republican member of Congress, say, oh my God, I hope this doesn't affect me, because if it does, a lot of those swing district congressional members right on the Republican side will be waving adios amigos, goodbye. But you know what's going on here? What's going on here, by the way, this is a 6 and an 8. What we're seeing here, choice for Congress, Republican-leaning independents in the 2024 election. Look at this. They supported Republican candidates by 83 points, but now it's 68 points. That's a 15-point drop again in only 18 months' time. These are not numbers that Republicans win with. These are numbers Republicans lose with. And so what we're seeing right now is that collapsing support for President Trump among Republican-leaning independents absolutely finding its way down ballot, making its way down ballot. And if these numbers hold for the 2026 election, which is occurring in only a little bit about 6 months' time, depending on how you exactly count 6 months, that would be absolutely devastating for Republicans.
Several states are talking about redistricting now. And it's a race ever since the Supreme Court raced to change the Voting Rights Act, gut it, if you will. How does this affect your party's ability to win back Congress in November, given that it looks like there's going to be a seat taken from Democrats in Louisiana, maybe one in Tennessee, maybe one in Alabama, several in Florida. Where does this leave your party?
I mean, it's a huge challenge. I mean, I think you have to step back and remember, what are they doing here? They are trying to keep a majority of congressional seats.
There's a moment in every illegal war when the president stops being able to outrun the calendar. For Donald Trump, that moment arrived quietly, without any formal announcement, somewhere around day 61, when the War Powers Act's 60-day clock ran out and his military operation. His exorcism, his little detour, became by the plain reading of a state passed by Congress in 1973, an unauthorized use of force illegal, full stop. And Trump knows it. That clip from day 62 is one of the more revealing moments of his presidency. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said. They don't like the word war. They call it a military operations because that way you don't have a war, you don't have legal problems. That's not a man talking about his enemies. That's a man narrating his own legal exposure in real time, apparently without realizing that's what he is doing. The semantic game, operation, not war. Extortion, not invasion, mini war. not the thing that triggers constitutional constraints, is exactly what the Vast Powers Act was designed to foreclose. Congress in 1973 had just spent a decade watching two presidents run an undeclared war through creative language and executive fiat. They weren't interested in giving the next one the same runway. The Vietnam comparison of Donald Trump's isn't just rhetorical. It is structurally important to understanding where we are. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed in a single day. Both chambers, near unanimous, voting on something they were told was a response to a direct military attack on U.S. naval vessels, an attack that turned out to be, at best, wildly exaggerated, and at worst, a deliberate fabrication used to provide legal cover for a war that was already being planned. Congress gave Lyndon Johnson a blank check, and Johnson cashed it for 500,000 troops and 58,000 American lives. Nixon inherited the war and expanded it. Neither of them ever claimed it would be over next week. Neither of them ever stood in front of a camera and said we could leave right now. Because every president before Trump understood, on basic level, that saying that transforms you from a commander-in-chief into a man choosing to spend other people's lives for reasons that have nothing to do with military necessity. That's the line that deserves more attention than it's getting. We could leave right now. If we left right now, it will take them 20-25 years to rebuild. Set aside the factual absurdity for a second. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, hit by nuclear weapons, were rebuilt in 10 years. Tehran, with oil revenue and intact institutions, is not going to need a quarter century to recover from conventional strikes. Set that aside, focus on the logic. A president is saying in public that he is choosing to continue a war he could end today, not because ending it today would compromise American security, not because their strategic objectives still do be achieved, but because he wants the other side to suffer longer. That is not a war aim. That is a disposition, and it is one that sits at deeply uncomfortable legal and moral territory, even by the loose standards that American wartime presidents have historically claimed themselves. The polling numbers are genuinely without precedent. Every previous American war that achieved majority oppositions, Vietnam, Iraq, started with majority support and eroded over time as casualties mounted and objectives blurred. The erosion was gradual, tracked against body counts and failed benchmarks. Trump's Iran war started underwater. Majority oppositions from day one. That has never happened before in the history of American military engagements. And it matters not just as pollution data point but as a signal about the fundamental legitimacy crisis this operation is operating under. Legitimacy in wartime isn't just a nice to have, it affects recruitment. It affects alliance cohesion. It affects the willingness of Congress to appropriate funds, and it affects the negotiation position of whoever eventually has to close this thing out diplomatically.